Hi and welcome. This is Gina from McGuire. I hope you're having a good week. Today I am sharing some tips for masking. Masking is a great way to create a one-layer look, but sometimes it can be tedious if you have to cut out a lot of kind of complicated images. So today I'm going to show you how you can do masking with coordinating dies to save time, and also how you can use your masks to plan out your card. And this really is a great way to think through your card and make sure you end up with the design that you want. I have a few different examples for you, and I'm going to start with this floral one first. This features the Pretty Pink Posh Flourishing Fuchsias stamp set and coordinating die set. For this technique, you can use any outline stamp images. I'm cutting apart my coordinating dies using my die cutters. A lot of people ask about the die cutters I use, and I'll link those below. Now I'm cutting off the little extra pieces of metal and cutting them right up against a baby wipe, so the baby wipe captures those tiny little sharp pieces. Once I've cut them all apart, I can wrap up that baby wipe and throw it away safely. Once I have all of my dies cut apart, I can also put them onto a magnetic sheet that I have attached to a 8x10 acrylic frame. That way I can have them all sitting up on my desk and I don't lose them. And on the other part of the frame, I can stick my stamps. And I'll link to those products below too. It's been really handy to have that. Now I'm preparing some masks. For masks, I've been using the Avery removable adhesive sheets lately because this is great for masking and inexpensive. It has a low tack stick to it, so it's perfect. I'm stamping each of the flowers and leaves onto the mask. I just use my MISTI stamping tool to save time, but you could stamp those with an acrylic block. I'm using small pieces of purple tape to hold the dies in place so that I can die cut all of these at once. That's a huge time saver. Once I've die cut my masks, I'm going to use the masks to create a guide for my stamping, to plan out where all of my stamped images will be. This is really a great thing to do because it helps you plan and saves time and makes sure you get all your images just where you want them. So this is an extra piece of white cardstock that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which is what my card will be. And I'm placing all of my floral images towards the top, how I want them to end up being stamped. And I'm making sure to overlap them so we can do some fun masking. I put my sentiment stamp in the middle just so I could be sure to save enough room for it. I'll stamp the same flowers on the top and on the bottom to save time. So notice I have everything how I want it. I want those leaves to be in the front, so those leaf masks are on top, and then the flowers kind of behind it. So we have the layering perfectly done, and that's exactly how I want my stamping to be. So I'm setting up my MISTI stamping tool with the creative corners so that I can have my images hang off the side of the card. I'm placing the guide into my MISTI stamping tool. This stamping tool will be very helpful for this technique. Now I'm starting with whatever masks are on top. That would be the leaves. And I'm lining the leaf up with the image right below, with the mask below it. Then I will close my MISTI door onto those leaves. Now I can stamp these leaves onto my card panel, and they'll be positioned perfectly, and they'll be in the front because we arranged our masking already. I'm stamping this with the new Gina K Jet Black Amalgam ink. This ink is the best black ink I've found in a long time because it stamps dark black and can be used with Copic's watercolor or colored pencils, and it doesn't bleed with Copic's at all. It's fantastic. So I stamped the leaves on the top of the card, rotated the card, and stamped them on the bottom also. And by the way, another great thing about this ink is it cleans off the stamps nicely. Okay, so I put my guide back into my MISTI, positioned the third leaf in there, and now I will stamp that third leaf onto our card panel. We don't need any of the masks just yet because none of these images overlap with each other. But these are the 3 images that'll be in the forefront on my final card. Okay, so now it's time to move those masks over. So I'm moving them from my guide over to my actual card panel and placing them right on top of my stamped images. This will protect those leaves when we do our additional stamping and also allow me to arrange our next stamps. Okay, so now on the guide, I will line up our next flower images, line it directly up with the masks. I'll close my MISTI door onto it. Then I can put my card panel into the MISTI every time I'm putting them right up against those creative corners. And I'll stamp. And since those masks are there, we have perfectly masked images. I'll move my mask to the bottom of the card and repeat the stamping there. I save a lot of time by stamping the same thing on the top and the bottom of the card. I will continue this process, doing the lining up of the stamps on the guide, moving the masks over, and stamping. This really is a great way to do quick masking. So here I'm moving the flower masks over since we just stamped them. And then I can do our last two images here. You can do as many layers of masking as you want. You just repeat the process each time. Now I do go back and add more stamped images later after I color this because I decided I wanted a bit more, but don't worry, I'll show that a bit later. Okay, so now we have all of our stamping done. Now one thing that you have to keep in mind when doing masks with your coordinating dies is that coordinating dies leave a little bit of trim around your image. So we have to go fill in that little bit that didn't stamp. See how the lines don't go up right against to the neighboring image? I go in with my Copic Multiliner. This is a very fine pen. And I just continue those lines. So just use an ink that matches whatever ink you stamped with, in this case black. And you can easily continue those lines. It's just a little bit to fill in between each image. That may take a little bit of time, but it doesn't take nearly as much time as having to fussy cut every single mask. So using the coordinating dies is a great way to save time. And by the way, this Copic Multiliner I use all the time, and it is Copic friendly, so we'll still be able to color these images with Copic markers. So I'm going to spare you from watching me do my Copic coloring. I'm not a pro at Copic coloring. As always, I'll link below to my favorite Copic artists. But I am just coming in with a few shades of each color. I either start with the light and work to the dark and then work my way back to blend them, or I do the reverse. In this case, I started with the dark, worked to the light, then I went back in reverse to blend them. I did pinks for part of the flower and purples for the other part of the flower. And you can see the colors I used up there at the top. Now you could color these however you want. It doesn't matter. You can use anything that you want since the ink that I chose is friendly with most mediums. Now this masking technique, I will say, works best with outline images because you need to go back in and continue the lines because the coordinating dies have that little bit of trim. So this masking is great if you want to stamp any outline images and then color them in. So after I stamped and colored these flowers, I decided that I wanted more leaves than just the 3 on each side. So I went and added some more leaves in. You don't have to do this, but I wanted to show you that you can add more if you want to. So I'm positioning the masks over these 2 flowers in the top, and then I will stamp a leaf over it. This will make it look like this leaf is in the background, which is the look I wanted to go for anyways. So I'll stamp this, and I'll do it on both sides. Then I'll use that black pen to continue the lines up to the neighboring images, and then I'll color them. And it kind of fills in some of that white space a bit better. So you can see how this technique would be excellent for a 1-layer card. However, I decided to add mine with dimension onto a card base. So I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card, and I trimmed my stamp panel down a little bit. I'm using liquid adhesive on craft foam and putting that between the 2 so that it has dimension. By using liquid adhesive, when I place this down on my card, I can slowly move it around until it's perfectly center and then place something heavy on it while it dries. For accents, I am using the Pretty Pink Posh Metallic Rose Gold Jewels. These are really cool. They're like black, but have a gold shiny metallic finish that's got a rose color to it that is just gorgeous. I did stamp my sentiment in the center there with black ink, and there you can see the finished card with lots of layered looks. I really love the look of masking, and it saves time by using the coordinating dies, and I could plan out my design. And by the way, at that point, I realized I missed a leaf, so I had to go in and color that one in. Okay, for the matching envelope, I'm using the new Pretty Pink Posh Happy Mail stamp set. That Sending You Happy Mail is perfect for envelopes, and now I have one that perfectly matches my card. Okay, my next card also features masking using the coordinating dies. For this one, I used 2 new stamp sets from Pretty Pink Posh. The first is Playful Puppies. There are lots of puppies on the set, so I decided to use several of them on my card. And I'll also be using the sentiment, the mailbox, and the little envelope from the Pretty Pink Posh Happy Mail stamp set. I went ahead and stamped a bunch of the puppies onto masking paper and cut them out with the coordinating dies, just like I did on the last card. I also stamped a bunch of the little envelopes onto the masking paper, but this time I'm cutting them out by hand. Since these are easy images to cut out, I'm cutting them out right up against the stamp line. I just find that for the puppies, the coordinating dies were much easier to use. I'm using a bunch of these envelopes, so I have several masks to quickly cut out. So I arranged all of my puppies, my mailbox, and a bunch of these little envelopes onto the front of my guide, and I'm putting that into my MISTI stamping tool. Notice that the envelopes are in the foreground, so they're up front, so those masks are on top. So we'll start with the envelopes first. Now I'm using the envelope stamp a bunch of times, so I have to do this process a few times, but it's the same as what I did on the last example. I lined up the stamp with the mask, put my card panel in, stamped that image, then I went back to the guide. And I'll move that mask over onto my card panel. And I'll just continue to do this process for all of the images. I start with the masks that are in the front, and then I work my way back. And before you know it, you have all of your images stamped with the masking done. So I'm skipping ahead here a bit, and I have stamped all of my envelopes and put the masks over those images. Now it's time to move on to the puppies. I'm saving time by stamping several of the puppies at once, lining them up with the masks on the guide, and then stamping them onto our card panel right over the envelope masks. So you can see how, planning out your masking on a guide really helps in making sure you get everything positioned perfectly. I have these little envelopes kind of in some of the doggies' mouths and in their paws. So by planning out the masking on the guide, I can make sure that everything ends up stamped perfectly in position. So here I'm finishing it up by doing the little doggy over on the side. You can see my masks there, so I can remove them now that I have all of my stamping done. And check out that 1-layer scene that we've created using masks created with the coordinating dies. So I sped through that a little bit to save time, but the process was exactly the same as the last example. Now I'm going in with my black pen to continue the lines to connect them with the neighboring images. I colored those with Copic Markers and added the sending you happy mail message on the bottom. And now I'm just drawing a few extra little grass areas by the puppies and coloring those in. So here you can see the final card. I trimmed the card panel down a bit and added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch black note card. And I put a white panel on the inside to write my message. Now I did use a black glaze pen on the hearts, nose, and eyes of the puppies, and I'll show you that a little bit later in this video. Okay, my last 2 examples feature the same technique of creating little masks using the coordinating dies. However, this time it's less about masking and more about getting the right placement or the design of your card. So I wanted to get these symmetrical butterflies, so I'm starting with a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece of white cardstock. This will be my guide. I drew a line down the center and then drew a couple lines about 2 inches from the ends of the card panel. I'm just using these pencil lines as a guide for lining things up. They could be really anywhere you want. So I stamped a bunch of butterflies on the masking paper and die cut them with the coordinating dies. So now I have these little sticky die cuts. This is super helpful because I can position these butterflies. I can move them around, I can change where they're located, and they don't shift as you're placing them because the sticky on the back of it. And I'm also using those pencil lines to get things straight. So once I have all my little sticky die cuts in place, I'm just going to kind of lift up some of the wings and pull some of the butterflies forward just so I can end up with the look that I want to have with the masking. So you can see that by creating these little masks with the masking paper, it's really helpful in getting this position just right and saves me a lot of time when we create the cards. putting my guide into my MISTI, transferring that first butterfly, the one that's on the top, and I'm stamping that first onto a card panel, again at the top and the bottom. And I'm actually going to create 2 cards. Since I have everything ready, I might as well. So I'll just continue this process where I stamp the first or the foremost mask, move the mask over to my stamp piece, and then continue with the other images. So I'll just move ahead since this process is the same as in my first example, and I'll end up with 2 card panels with all of these masked butterflies. And they're all perfectly positioned since we use that guide to position each stamp. Next, I'm using my black pen just to connect those images to the neighboring images since we used those coordinating dies to create the masks. Okay, so I did some Copic coloring. I just went rainbow crazy. I grabbed all of my favorite colors of Copic. If you wanted to, you could do a little screenshot here to see the different colors that I like. I tell you, I reach for the same Copic markers every time. I don't think there's a reason to have a ton of them, but that's just my opinion. So I use those favorites to color these butterflies. Now I'm using a black glaze pen to color on the bodies and add a little bit of shine and a tiny bit of dimension. Okay, so I created my little cards here. I trimmed those panels down and put them onto black note cards with the white panel on the inside. For this first one, I added a stacked lovely script die cut to the center. I stacked 3 white die cuts together and then 1 black on top of that for some dimension. Next, I went in with my black glaze pen and colored over the lovely die cut. That gives it a little bit of shine that is just perfect. I'll be doing that a lot in the future. This is the first time I tried it. That glaze pen is great on those die cuts. For the other card, I used green, blues, and oranges, and then I used the new Pretty Pink Posh Get Well Soon die, and I stacked 3 white die cuts on top of each other. So there you have a way of using your coordinating dies and masking to not only do quicker masking, but also to plan out your card design. I hope this was helpful. I list my supplies in the description below. In the middle are a couple other masking videos that might be of interest. I appreciate you spending time here. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.